So welcome to class. Today is February 1st, 2020, and welcome to all of my virtual listeners that are also listening into the recording. I'm going to have everybody just make sure that their audio and visual set up, and also that you have your chat icon open, and you can get that from that lower right-hand corner with that bubble sign because we will be using it. So now we're just going to do a quick quality check, and you can raise your hand if you can hear me. Just raise your hand real quick and then lower them. Are you able to see the screen that says quality check with a thumbs up beside it? Perfect. And then just make sure to remove any distractions in the room that you're listening in. And then we're also just going to do a quality check to make sure that that red icon for recording is up and I see it. Thank you very much. All right, so now I'm just going to dive into class. For this session, we're just going to be going over the evolution of distant learning delivery and technology usage. We'll also describe how emerging technologies can support engagement for deeper learning. And then we're also going to briefly go over the definition of online learning, blended learning, and massive open online courses. So just as an icebreaker, I'm thinking back when I was going over this session, back in the 80s when you used to have little infomercials that popped up for learning packs. So this is going probably a little bit more recent than the paper packs, but you used to get a book and maybe a video or a DVD or even a cassette. So if you had the choice now for a distant language course, would you prefer the CD recording with books? Let's say you're trying to learn taking a French course, or would you like to do a course that incorporates some type of interactive tools such as Duolingo? So if you're not familiar with Duolingo, it's a online and phone app where you can practice language, and they give you quizzing, and you can talk back, and it'll tell you if you're saying the language correct or not. So if you would like, you can go on ahead and just raise your hand if you would prefer something similar to Duolingo in comparison to the old way. All right, and then just as a brief opportunity, would you like to just explain your reasoning to why you raised your hand on the choice for the phone app? All right, Adam, great.
I feel like having that little extra bit of interaction with the app is a little more engaging than simply just like listening to a tape or something like that.
Thank you. Yes. So a lot of times, I mean, you got to listen into how to say something correctly, but if I tried to say it, did I say it correctly or in the wrong tone, or maybe I didn't pronounce one of the letters correctly? That's something that a phone app, if you're talking back and it's giving you immediate feedback, is able to correct you right away. So thank you. That was just a quick example. So that's pretty much kind of what this course and this session is about. So historical distance learning started with just the basic printer learning paths that were provided. There wasn't any feedback. It lacked two-way communication, and that's probably due to the limited use of technology that was available at the time. This is going back from the 1960s with Odo Peters, and it was mainly print-based material. So the previous option that I had spoke about, that's probably, I would say, 90s approach to distant learning. And that's, I mean, they had other options, but that was just one of the examples. Another example is campus-based learning, which we still use to this day. So the traditional learning delivery, it's mainly with students going on campus. They listen to lectures, but the same way as printed material, they're only providing one-way interaction if they're heavily depending on the lectures for students to retain information. So the students are listening in, they're taking notes, and it's dependent upon the instructor, but many times they don't get any feedback until they go to take a quiz or take a test where they'll find out if they had retained the information correctly or not. And this is really a passive way of learning. So many of the institutions are trying to get away from only passive learning because it does not engage the learner. And it doesn't give them any feedback or any interaction to engage them so they can reach that deeper understanding. So just as a quick poll, early distant learners are dependent heavily on paper packs for information and tests. That goes along with the lecture impacted learning. Is this an example of passive or active learning? So what you can do is go in the chat box and just type in your answer. Great. So we can all agree those examples are passive learning. It's not giving the students much interaction to be able to put their input to make sure they're learning the correct things and that they're retaining it, or even giving them an opportunity for problem solving. So what we have learned now more recently, and now that we have the emergence of new technologies, learning engagement has been a big thing. So we are trying to incorporate active learning activities and problem solving skills for students to have opportunities for deeper learning. So in our textbook, they had talked about an approach by Bohr in 1990, and he pretty much was calling this the scholarship of discovery. So that's making sure our students are not only given information, but they're also given an opportunity to find activities that would include like problem solving, discovering new ideas, and also application. And that all can be used by technology. A lot of the tools are out there for the technology to be used for collaborative and active learning. However, it's a lot of hesitation with educators, and it's within different ways, if it's higher education, elementary, or if you're in the adult corporate world, with using the tools to open up those opportunities for students to be able to get into that active engagement of discovering collaborative learning. So just thinking on the difference between passive and active learning in a even if it's in a remote or a face-to-face interaction, how do you feel some of these could be used for engaging a learning environment? So what you can do is use your pencil that's at the top of your screen, or you can use the shape icon if you prefer, and circle an example of a technology tool that can be used. All right, so thank you. So a lot of times, as I had mentioned, the final exam, that's at the end of the class. If it's only lectures or even an asynchronous course where it's only recorded lectures, there's not much of opportunity or activities that are set for the student to be able to learn at a deeper level or get feedback. That feedback is after the final exam. Usually that's depending on their grade. Lecture-only classes, that stems from the final classes where it's not giving any feedback. However, you can use student polls, and you can use it both in person or as a remote setting to have students give you feedback, and that also creates an opportunity. If there are misconceptions among your group of learners, you're able to give corrective feedback, and that can even be in a large or small group setting. Discussion boards are a good option if it's an asynchronous class, because even though they're not all in a class at the same time. However, they can communicate and bounce ideas off of each other in another way that's supported by technology. So now we're just going to go over a couple of examples for online learning. Online learning, the definition is any learning environment where network computers are used for communication among educators or learners. This is live sessions, recorded sessions, or interactive sessions. Blending learning, you get the best of both worlds because you are able to be in a classroom setting that's face-to-face interaction, but then you also have tools that can be used online. This is nice because it can be tailored to your profession or to your subject, and it just gives opportunity for students that may feel like they have isolation if they're only on a strictly online curriculum. And then we have massive online classes, and these are large online classes usually taught by professionals or experts that are large base, anybody can attend, and it's mainly for information access only, not really for interaction or feedback. So a lot of times you won't see any collaborative learning in these programs. So now we're just going to do their activity. So as a student, do you feel a technology tool would create a collaborative learning environment? You can just post in the discussion board your response. So if you're all for collaborative learning using technology tools, you can put a smiley face maybe, or if you disagree, you can put perfect. So there are people that are all about collaborative learning and technology tools. There are those, again, that aren't so good about it. I believe a lot of institutions now, they're still swaying along using those technology tools. And that is dependent on what your student has available and what your educator has available. I will say if you are using technology tools, just use them wisely. So you want to avoid trivial online discussions that really aren't pertaining to your objectives, and also going away from busy work. So there are some educators. That's right, Lori. Thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of students where they can't get some of the education needed, like if they don't have, if it's a blended online course, but they don't have internet at home. Well, that's that's an issue. Or, if I'm trying to do something that's on a phone app and they don't have a phone, if they don't have a phone, they're not able to participate. So that's something I try to take in consideration. Another thing is putting discussion boards to make them topics that actually are relevant, so they do have meaningful discourse to the material. So engagement, as I had mentioned, through technology tools, this is intended for the student experience, so they do get a deeper understanding for information. It also goes ways because the educators are able to track the progress of the student when they're going through the steps, and also seeking that feedback to make sure that the students are understanding and they're able to apply it at a deeper, maybe a more extensive response. Coaches just opens the door for more than one student to be able to interact with each other. So when they have a collaborative approach, if it's either asynchronous, synchronous, or a face-to-face class, you can get meaningful, engaged learning. I'm just going to give a quick example in my field of how I've used collaborative approach and also technology tools. So I work in a remote setting, so face-to-face. Also, a blended course is not an option. So in the beginning, we used to have these pre-recorded sessions that we used to record, have our new employees watch, and then they would start working. We didn't have any feedback or assessments or anything like that. And then we noticed that there were mistakes occurring because those people weren't even, we weren't following up to make sure they understood the material. Then we went to interactive sessions where we would say verbally, almost like a lecture, or it was live, but we didn't, again, have feedback. Then we moved to having live conferences, and we even started including, instead of individually, in groups, and I would ask questions or have someone do a task, and they would talk, and I had even some of the students that had just learned the material be able to explain it to another student, which not necessarily was in the same way, but it was the same information that showed me that student had a deeper understanding. And then on the other side, it helped another student learn better. The collaborative approach, even in a remote setting, using technologies can be useful. So for our final activity, I'm just going to have you use your text feature. That's the T at the top of the screen. And then I'm just going to have you answer this question. In a virtual synchronous learning environment, using a collaborative approach, what ideas can you think of to use existing technology tools, maybe in your own field? And you can just make a suggestion down below if you have one. And if we have any virtual listeners, you can add these questions just in your Miss Class summary. All right, great. So I have using video chat to facilitate workshops, text chats. Yes. So I like ever put video, because that's another thing. When you are in a remote setting, you lose that personal interaction with others. And I do have people turn on their videos where we do have small groups, and it does help. So people see their faces. You can see their, if I see somebody that looks confused, I'm able to say, hey, do you need me to elaborate? So I do like to use the video feature if it is available. Texting, I love those as well, just because if they're present, most of the time, even if their audio isn't working, they're able to text. All right, so I am now done with my session. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to turn off my recording.